My name is Naomi Clark. I'm 32 years old, and I thought I was planning a wedding with the love of my life. But last week, a banker called to ask if I had spent over $30,000 on 3 different engagement rings, a luxury villa in Napa, and a shopping spree in New York, all of it under my name. My fiancé had used my credit, my accounts, even my social security number. While I was choosing flowers and table settings, he was building a second life, one lie at a time. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened my laptop, because the moment he stole my identity, he gave me a reason to fight back. And what he didn't know was that I remembered every password he ever reused. If you've ever trusted the wrong person, stay here. Like, subscribe, and let me show you how I turned heartbreak into revenge he never saw coming. My fiancé said I was the love of his life, right before he used my name to buy 3 different engagement rings in 1 week. I didn't scream. I didn't even hang up on the banker who called to confirm whether I had personally authorized $7,200 for bridal inventory in New York, $6,400 for a surprise proposal in Napa, and another $9,800 for a villa suite booked under my social security number. No, I just stood there in the middle of my kitchen, holding the phone in one hand and my breath in the other, as the walls of my life began to crack like glass under pressure. My name was on everything, every loan, every card, every fraudulent payment he had made to fuel his secret life. And I had loved him. God help me, I had trusted him with passwords, with access to joint accounts, with every part of myself I thought safe behind commitment and affection. While I was planning color palettes and seating charts, he was siphoning my credit score into the ground, stringing together a luxury lifestyle built on lies, betrayals, and perfectly practiced smiles. I wish I could say I collapsed, or cried, or begged him to explain. I didn't. I opened my laptop, because the moment he turned my identity into his personal ATM, he gave me permission to become something else entirely, something colder, sharper, and infinitely more patient. He'd always been careless online, reused usernames, outdated passwords, forgotten logins to apps from years ago. He assumed no one would ever dig. He thought his trail was covered. But if he had spent half as much effort protecting his secrets as he did living them, maybe I wouldn't have found the first digital breadcrumb that night. I was no longer the woman he could sweet-talk into silence. He didn't just underestimate me. He gave me every tool I needed to tear down his illusion. Because I wasn't just broken. I was about to become dangerous. You think that was the worst part? Not even close. If someone ever made you feel crazy for questioning the truth, keep watching. Because I promise, what comes next will make you look twice at every smile you've ever trusted. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a technical glitch, a misapplied charge. But the charges kept coming. First, a $2,700 transaction at a luxury resort I'd never heard of. Then $4,200 at a boutique in Milan, followed by a wire transfer labeled only with a woman's name I didn't recognize. When I logged into my bank account, it no longer felt like mine. Every number was foreign. Every payment was a wound. And then came the real blow. A letter addressed to me from a loan agency, congratulating me on being approved for a $40,000 personal loan, one I never applied for, never signed, never even knew existed. I held the letter in shaking hands and asked him if he knew anything. He laughed, pulled me in close, kissed my temple, and said, "Baby, you're overworked. You need rest, maybe even a little help." He told our friends I was stressed, that I was misremembering things, that the pressure of wedding planning was getting to me. And they believed him. Why wouldn't they? He was charming, polished, always calm. I was the one making frantic phone calls to credit bureaus and sleeping in the living room because I couldn't bear the sound of his breathing. I went to the police. They hesitated. "Do you have proof?" they asked. Could it be a domestic misunderstanding? They looked at me like I was the problem. Soon, my debit card stopped working. My phone plan was suddenly suspended for non-payment. I couldn't access the joint account. I couldn't book a hotel. I couldn't call for help. Everything that made me real in the world, my name, my money, my record, had been poisoned with his lies. I wasn't just erased, I was overwritten. I wasn't just ignored, I was redefined. And through it all, he kept smiling, kept reassuring me that it was all a big misunderstanding, just paperwork gone wrong, just fatigue clouding my memory. But I knew better. I could feel myself sinking under the weight of his betrayal, as if my own identity had become the shovel he used to bury me alive. They didn't steal my identity, they buried me under it, and I was running out of air. Have you ever been pushed so far that silence no longer felt like safety, but surrender? I want you to ask yourself, what would you do if the person you loved most became the reason you lost everything? The day I found the breadcrumb, I wasn't even looking for it. I was just trying to make sense of the wreckage, digging through an old hard drive, searching for a scanned receipt to contest one of the endless fraudulent charges when I saw it. A folder labeled with something ridiculous, some alias he used back when we first met in a gaming forum. I'd almost forgotten about it. Almost. But Daniel never changed his habits. He just buried them beneath polish and perfume. That username, it wasn't just a memory, it was a master key. I typed it into a few forgotten platforms, just to see. A private Pinterest board unlocked. Photos of candlelit dinners in Santorini, couples massages in Bali, and not a single image had me in it. Then came the Google Drive, a folder marked Q4 reimbursements. I opened it, expecting a few work files. What I found was a spreadsheet, color-coded, precise. Payments to hotels, florists, even recurring charges to a private concierge service, all logged under my name, paid with my credit, my trust, my life. My hands stopped trembling. I wasn't confused, I wasn't delusional, and I damn sure wasn't dead. That night, I called Ivy. She used to sit behind me in high school computer lab, coding games for fun, while the rest of us struggled through Excel. Now she worked in digital forensics for a private firm in Chicago. We hadn't spoken in years. I sent her one screenshot, then another. The silence on the line after the third file said everything. "Give me access," she whispered. Let's see how deep this rabbit hole goes. We worked in secret, nights bled into mornings. I learned how metadata could tell a better truth than any man ever could. Ivy taught me how to trace IP jumps and verify timestamp integrity. We dug up old email caches, backup servers, even archived chat logs. Every file he thought was deleted was just waiting to be found. Every photo he took to brag in private now sat in our hands. I wasn't clawing for breath anymore. I was building a case, piece by piece, click by click. He left crumbs. I brought fire. And just when you think I'm done collecting clues, wait until you see how I use them. This isn't just a story of betrayal, it's a digital chess game. And I've just made my first move. I didn't raise my voice. I raised a file folder. Thick, heavy, and bursting at the seams with digital receipts, IP logs, login histories, shipping confirmations, cross-referenced names, timestamps, aliases. Each page was a cut of truth, sharpened and cold. I spent days combing through everything: bank statements, fake billing addresses, luxury invoices tied to my social security number. Every late-night transaction he thought was invisible became a nail in his coffin. I sat across from a lawyer with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She didn't ask if I was sure. She just read through the folder, tapped her pen once and said, "We're going after him civil and criminal. This isn't petty theft. This is a blueprint for federal fraud." I nodded. I didn't want revenge. I wanted accountability. Public, legal, and permanent. We filed the identity theft complaint, then a civil lawsuit, and alongside it, a petition to freeze all accounts opened under my name, pending the investigation. I requested every agency to re-verify biometric access. Ivy had even traced a few login locations that matched hotel stays from his Instagram. The same hotels where he posted sunset champagne toast with captions like, "Living my best life." I printed those too. Evidence, yes. But also, a mirror he'd be forced to stare into. And the folder? I gave it a name. Not evidence, not case file. I titled it, "For the Next Woman." Because I knew there'd be one. There always is. These men don't stop. They just relocate. When the summons was delivered, it arrived on Daniel's doorstep, tucked between the floral arrangements and a custom cake. His birthday. He thought it was a gift. In a way, it was. A gift-wrapped end to the performance. I wasn't there to see his face, but I heard from a friend of a friend. He went pale, then red, then silent, like a switch flipped. No more champagne, no more curated illusions. No, I didn't ruin his party. He ruined his own life. I just sent the invitation. Now, if you've been nodding along thinking, good for her, buckle up, because I haven't just exposed the cracks. I'm about to blow the whole mask off. And I want you right here with me when it happens. It took exactly 17 seconds for the internet to catch fire. Daniel had just posted a smiling selfie, kneeling in front of a woman I'd never seen before, on the edge of a cliffside resort, with champagne flutes in the background and the caption, "She said yes." He looked polished, triumphant, like a man who believed he had pulled off the impossible. What he didn't know was that by the time his fingers hit share, the countdown had already begun. At that very moment, my website, His Real Life, went live. The homepage was clean, almost clinical. A black background, white serif text, and a single line that read, "For anyone else who ever loved him, you weren't alone." Below it, the real Daniel. Side-by-side images of him with 3 different women, in 3 different cities, each time using the same recycled speech, the same premeditated promises. Embedded maps marked his travel paths, matched with hotel check-ins and Uber receipts. Screenshots of chats, flirtatious lies layered over copied and pasted declarations of love. Bank statements showed my money spent on other women's jewelry, airline upgrades, private massages. There was even a folder labeled Contingency Plan, with notes detailing how he planned to vanish when his juggling act eventually collapsed. I didn't explain it. I didn't editorialize. I didn't have to. The data spoke louder than any accusation ever could. By the time Daniel saw the site, it was already too late. He tried to delete his proposal post, but the screenshots were circulating faster than he could breathe. Comments flooded in. DMs exploded. His phone rang and rang and rang. He called me 6 times, then 8, then 17. I never picked up. I sent one message, just one. This isn't revenge. This is documentation. He went silent after that, completely. His social media accounts vanished. His name was scrubbed from bios, company pages, and relationship statuses. He didn't just lose control of the story, he became the story. And as it unraveled in public, I watched from the quiet comfort of a browser tab, sipping coffee, no longer shaking, no longer afraid, just done. Think a viral post is powerful? Wait till you see what happens when the truth hits someone's career, family, and ego at the same time. You're not ready for this next move, but he wasn't either. Daniel once bragged that he was about to land a 6-figure position managing financial portfolios at an exclusive firm. Final round, he had said, with a smirk that suggested inevitability. So I waited until the morning of his final interview, until I was sure his email was already buzzing with HR logistics. And then I pulled the pin. The firm received a full dossier titled Candidate Risk Profile, Daniel Whitaker. Inside, digital evidence of identity theft, financial manipulation, falsified tax documents, and patterns of serial fraud across state lines. No accusations. Just raw, time-stamped truth. But I didn't stop there. I forwarded the same collection to his parents, the ones who used to call me our future daughter-in-law. I sent it to his college roommates, who had once idolized him. And I sent it, personally, to each of the other women whose names I'd discovered tucked in his travel itineraries and message threads. I didn't add commentary, just one line, in case he ever said you imagined it. Still, the most satisfying move didn't go to a person. It went to the internet. Years ago, Daniel had created a love blog. a painfully earnest corner of the web called foreverafter.me, where he posted poems about destiny and devotion under his favorite alias. He let the domain expire years back, probably thinking no one remembered. But I remembered. And I bought it, quietly, strategically. Then I rebuilt it, not with poetry, but with pages that laid bare every lie he ever told, every woman he juggled, every dollar he funneled through stolen names. The site wasn't malicious. It was archival, sleek, black and white, with collapsible tabs of categorized deceit. Visitors could search by year, city, even hotel chain. It didn't go viral in the way you might expect. No hashtags, no drama. But it found its way to every inbox it needed to. He lost the job. He lost his public image. He lost the illusion that anyone still believed his story. And when he tried to confront me about it, I replied with nothing more than this. I didn't expose you out of spite. I exposed you because truth doesn't need a disguise. You might think it ends here, right? Justice served. Lies exposed. But stick with me, because what I found next wasn't just healing. It was transformation. And it changed everything. The apartment was small, but it was mine. No marble countertops, no vintage wine fridge humming in the corner, no artificial roses in gilded vases pretending to mean something. Just a second-floor walk-up with sun-warmed wooden floors, a modest balcony that faced east, and a front door that locked with a satisfying click. I moved in on a Thursday, alone but unafraid. I had changed my name legally 3 weeks prior. Naomi Clark no longer appeared on any active databases, except one, a new blog I had launched under the pseudonym The Unmasked Heart. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. Just a simple space where women like me could gather, read, and slowly let go of the shame we never should have carried. Each morning, I brewed coffee in silence and opened my laptop with fingers no longer trembling. I responded to emails from strangers who weren't really strangers at all, women who recognized the same lies I once mistook for love, who saw their own pain reflected in my words. I didn't offer them legal advice or false promises. I offered something softer. I offered the truth without judgment, that they weren't naive, weren't weak, weren't alone, that healing didn't come in grand declarations or viral posts. It came in remembering how to breathe without waiting for permission. One message arrived on a rainy Tuesday. It was from a woman who signed off simply as a former wife. Her words were precise, careful. She had once been married to him, Daniel, and when she dared to report the financial abuse, he threatened to sue her for defamation. She folded, moved to another state, and stayed silent for years. But now, after seeing the site, the reports, the ripple effect, she had found the courage to speak again. She wrote, "Thank you for making me feel like I wasn't crazy." I stared at that sentence for a long time before typing my reply. It didn't need to be long. I just said, "You are not alone." Sometimes healing arrives not with fireworks, but with a quiet Saturday morning, with the smell of lavender steeping in a mug, and sunlight threading through curtains that don't have to match anything except your mood. I began growing herbs on the balcony, basil, mint, and a stubborn patch of lavender that refused to bloom until the 4th week. I liked the ritual of watering them slowly, whispering to the soil like it had secrets I hadn't yet earned. There was peace in tending to something that only needed light, water, and patience. On one of those mornings, as I watered the mint, a glint of silver caught my eye beneath a small potted sunflower. It was my old keychain, brushed steel, engraved with the name Naomi. I must have tossed it in a fit of rage months ago, back when I still thought closure required burning things. I picked it up and held it in my palm. The engraving was faded, but the shape still felt familiar, like the echo of someone I used to be. I didn't cry. I didn't toss it again. I simply placed it in a drawer with other fragments of a life that no longer defined me. Some evenings, I walked to the corner store and chatted with the woman at the counter, Maria, who gave me extra honey packets without asking why. Sometimes I visited Ivy, who had since started a cyber safety nonprofit, and insisted I help her name the programs. We settled on calling one ghost light, a nod to leaving lights on in the darkest corners of the internet, where abusers like Daniel once thrived. But my favorite moments were the quietest ones. When the house was still, the inbox was quiet, and the lavender finally bloomed. I would sit on that little balcony, legs tucked beneath me, a journal in my lap, and let the world exist without urgency. The air smelled like redemption, of things left behind, not in bitterness, but in bloom. I learned that justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it sounded like violence after years of gaslighting. Sometimes it looked like an inbox full of women finding their voice again. Sometimes it bloomed exactly when you stopped waiting for it. Daniel's name still trended for a few weeks. News outlets picked up the story, victims came forward, and lawyers swirled around like sharks in suits. But in my world, this new, quiet world, his name no longer had power. It was just another dead flower I had already composted into something better. And so I watered the basil, wiped the counters, and turned my face to the morning sun. I didn't need revenge to feel powerful. I didn't need closure to move forward. I had something better. I had peace. Some villains go out with a bang. Others, they just fade, quietly, painfully, undone by their own reflection. Keep watching, because his silence, that's where the real punishment began. He used to walk into rooms like the floor was his stage and the spotlight was contractually obligated to follow. Tailored suits, a gold watch that caught every sliver of light, smiles rehearsed down to the blink. Daniel Whitaker was built for illusion. But illusions don't last when the truth walks in wearing steel-toed facts. By the time the last link on the exposé had finished circulating, the man who once juggled lies like champagne flutes was nothing more than a cautionary tale drifting through inboxes and whispered warnings. He didn't lose everything all at once. It was slower, more painful, like peeling away layers of a carefully polished self-image only to find rot underneath. First, the job offer vanished. A brief, embarrassed message from the company's HR department. In light of recent developments, we are unable to proceed. Then the apartment. Eviction notice pinned to the same mahogany door he once bragged had keyless entry and city views. His landlord didn't even respond to his pleas for leniency. Daniel packed his designer luggage in silence, leaving behind a life that had never truly belonged to him. Bank accounts were frozen next, one after the other, flagged for suspicious activity, connected to multiple fraud reports. By the time he tried to transfer what little cash remained, the screens greeted him with blank errors and locked logins. His lawyer, if you could call the panicked voice on the phone a lawyer, told him a class action suit was forming. 3 women had already joined, and more were emailing daily. The digital dossier Naomi had crafted was more than evidence. It was a detonator. He took to social media, as narcissists often do when reality doesn't mirror their delusions. His post was short, typed hastily in the middle of a long sleepless night. Everyone turned their back. Everyone was fake from the beginning. The words hung on his profile like a damp shirt in the wind, sagging, pitiful, exposed. No one commented, no one hit like. A post meant as a cry for sympathy was swallowed whole by the void he had built around himself. Friends didn't reach out, colleagues deleted his contact. His phone, once alive with vibrations and calendar alerts, now sat heavy and silent on a scratched coffee table in someone else's basement guest room, the only place he could crash after losing everything. Even his reflection seemed to reject him. The man in the mirror looked smaller now. The slicked back hair had dulled, the skin under his eyes darkened by anxiety and insomnia. He started skipping shaves, not by choice, but because he couldn't face himself long enough to care. The messages didn't stop, though. Not the good kind, not the apologetic kind. Emails from lawyers, DMs from victims, notifications about pending investigations. Every ping reminded him that the web he'd spun so confidently had finally snapped, tightening around his own throat. And still, Naomi didn't say a word to him. That silence was louder than any confrontation. She didn't gloat. She didn't reply to the status. She didn't appear in his peripheral world at all. And that absence, It haunted him more than anything else. Because she had become something untouchable. Not a victim, not even an avenger. Just free. Free from his orbit. Free from needing to witness his collapse. He was no longer part of her story, and that erasure was its own kind of death. He tried reaching out once. A single email sent at 2:47 a.m. Subject line empty. The message inside read only, "You win." But it bounced back instantly. The address no longer existed. Sometimes he'd open her blog, not to read, but to check if she mentioned him. She never did. Not by name, not even with a metaphor. She'd moved on to helping others. Women healing, women reclaiming, women who didn't need his name to understand the kind of man he was. Each new post was another reminder that the world was moving forward and he was not invited. In the end, he didn't need prison bars to feel trapped. He didn't need handcuffs or headlines. He had his own mind, looping through the highlight reel of every lie he'd ever told. He had the silence of a world that used to orbit him and now didn't notice he was gone. Naomi never saw the final photo he posted. Him sitting alone in a coffee shop, hood pulled low, caption simply, "Just trying to breathe." The comments were off. No one shared it, but she didn't need to see it. She already knew. He had burned himself down quietly, and no one showed up to watch. So what do you do with the ashes? Some people rebuild. I chose to plant something new. And if you've ever been broken, I hope this next part reminds you that your story isn't over yet. It didn't happen overnight. Healing never does. But piece by piece, like laying the final stones of a shattered mosaic, I began to rebuild something I thought I'd lost forever. My sense of self. Not the woman who let love blind her. Not the woman whose name had been used like a stolen passport. But the one who survived and decided that survival alone wasn't enough. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted to rewrite the ending, mine, and maybe someone else's too. So I built something new. I called it the Second Identity Project. Not just a name, but a promise. A place for people, mostly women, but not only, who had watched their lives, their credit, their privacy, their dignity unravel at the hands of someone they once trusted. I started small. One online post explaining my story, followed by an email address for anyone who wanted to talk. Then came the stories, pouring in like late-night thunder. Quiet at first, then deafening. They came from every state, every background, every kind of relationship. It wasn't just fiancés. It was wives, siblings, best friends, even parents. People betrayed in the most intimate ways, trying to climb out from underneath the weight of someone else's choices. With Ivy's help and her brilliance, I set up virtual seminars, open Q&As, and a growing resource hub. We published an ebook, free to download, on the steps to take when you find out your identity's been stolen by someone close. Not just the legal path, but the emotional one too. How to tell your story without shame. How to believe in yourself again. How to stop asking why it happened and start asking what you can do with what's left. We called our support circles reclaim rooms. They were never about anger. They were about ownership. We listened. We cried. We laughed more than I expected. And slowly, the shame lost its grip. It didn't feel like a wound anymore. It felt like a scar. And scars don't mean you're broken. They mean you healed and remembered. The first time I spoke in public, I stood behind a podium in a library basement with peeling paint and a faulty mic. But the room was packed. Faces I didn't know, but whose stories I carried in my inbox. I didn't read a speech. I didn't quote statistics. I just told the truth. About Daniel, about the lies, about the morning I looked at my own reflection and didn't cry anymore. I told them I wasn't proud of what happened to me, but I wasn't ashamed of how I responded. That he wore my name to cheat, and I wore my scars to teach. And when the applause came, it wasn't loud. It was soft, gentle hands clapping like they were afraid to break something precious. But it was the most honest sound I'd ever heard. People began referring others to us. social workers, lawyers, even a few officers from identity theft task forces. We weren't just a support group anymore. We were a movement. Quiet, persistent, necessary. One evening, after hosting a late-night Zoom session with a young woman in Alaska who'd lost everything to her brother, I sat on my balcony with a cup of mint tea. The sky had just turned that kind of violet blue that makes you believe in poetry again. My neighbor's cat had snuck onto my railing. Somewhere inside, a playlist was humming soft jazz from a half-forgotten speaker. I leaned back, breathed in, and smiled. The world hadn't changed, but I had. And that was enough. A few days later, I finalized the documents for the nonprofit's long-term foundation status. It was official now, bigger than me. I drafted my will too. Nothing dramatic, just a few pages that said, if I left anything behind, let it go to someone who still believed healing was louder than hate. I added a line at the end. Forgiveness doesn't mean inheritance. I don't know where Daniel is anymore. I stopped checking. At some point, curiosity fades and peace takes its place. He no longer lives in my head or in my name. The silence around him is louder than any courtroom verdict. And honestly, I think that's the only justice I needed. Now, I water my plants every morning. The lavender is thriving. I keep a printout of the Second Identity logo beside my desk. It's shaped like a key, with a fingerprint inside. Every now and then, I get letters from women I'll never meet in person. Some write paragraphs. Some just say thank you. And every time I read one, I know. This is the legacy that matters. Not the money lost, not the pain endured, but the voice reclaimed, the life rebuilt, the boundary drawn, and never crossed again. I didn't win by destroying him. I won by refusing to become him. And as I sit, sipping my tea, watching the first light stretch across the horizon, I feel something rare and weightless inside me. Something I once thought was lost forever. Dignity. Because when the story is finally yours to write, you don't need to scream it. You just need to live it, quietly, powerfully, proudly. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If my story meant something to you, if it made you feel seen or strong or simply less alone, leave a comment below, share your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Because there are more stories like this, waiting to be told, and maybe one of them is yours.